Question number 5, Grant Robertson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Finance. Does he agree with First NZ Capital that there is a 25 to 30% chance of New Zealand going into a recession in the next 12 months?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, no consistent advice from officials and elsewhere suggests the economy can be expected to grow at an annual rate of between 2 and 2.5% in the year ahead. That is not to discount that there are downside risks in the international economy, and there has been some significant turbulence affecting global markets recently, which, if for instance it continued or worsened, would have some impact on our growth prospects. But of course the member could be cheered up by the fact that, for instance, today export figures show that exports in July this year are around 14% higher in New Zealand dollar values than they were in July 12 months ago. So there's some indication the economy is responding.
Mr Speaker.
Supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
Is it correct that per capita GDP growth was negative in the March quarter?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, I can't confirm whether that's the case, but it's possible because we have a record high inflow of migrants, particularly from Australia, for the first time in a generation, a net inflow from Australia, and it's possible that because of the very large number of people turning up in New Zealand and turning up to the labour market, that per capita GDP growth may be temporarily negative.
Supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
Does he think per capita GDP growth will improve in the June quarter? And if not, what would he call 2 quarters of negative per capita GDP growth?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, well, it's more than 2 quarters negative. In fact, I think it's 42 quarters negative. Mr Speaker, with respect to the member's question, don't actually follow per capita GDP quarterly. It makes no real sense to follow quarterly numbers of that type, because productivity, and GDP growth is a medium to longer term phenomenon, and of course more people turning up is to some extent a vote of confidence in New Zealand's future growth prospects, because when the Members' Party was in charge, they were leaving in their tens of thousands.
Mr Speaker.
Supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
Doesn't he think that the fact that he's had to move in just a couple of months from arguing that the New Zealand economy had no problems at all to arguing whether or not we're heading into a recession might be a cause for him to finally be straight up with New Zealanders about the state of the New Zealand economy?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, I think that shows that the opposition underestimate New Zealanders. New Zealanders aren't waiting round for some politician to give them a verdict on the economy. They are making their own decisions in their businesses and their households and their organisations. They take account of all the information they see around them, and we back them. We think they're making good decisions because they're adaptable and resilient people.
Supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
Does he stand by his statement on Radio New Zealand this morning that the government strategy for diversification of the economy amounts to waiting for a sector to fail, and doesn't he think he owes New Zealanders a bit more urgency when it comes to diversification than a broken down ambulance at the bottom of the cliff?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, of course I stand by the statement, which isn't of course what the member actually said. The government has been pursuing a strategy of significant and growing investment in science and innovation. That's been important for industries that want to diversify. But I'd simply pointed out the obvious. If prices in one sector drop, New Zealanders don't wait round for the opposition spokesman to tell them what to do. They shift their investment and employment to sectors that are growing, such as ICT, that's growing at 10% a year, wine exports that are 3 times what they were 10 years ago, tourism, which is burgeoning. Of course those sectors are going to attract investment and jobs.
Question number 6, Ian McKelvey.
Thank you, Mr